She mocked her poor classmate at the reunion, but he arrived as a billionaire with a supermodel wife. Life has a way of turning tables when we least expect it. In a hall filled with old classmates, laughter, and memories, one moment of pride quickly turned into a lesson none would ever forget. She thought the past was something to laugh about, a chance to show off what she believed she had gained. But destiny does not forget the ones it once humbled, nor those it quietly prepared for greatness. By the end of that night, the room would fall silent, hearts would tremble, and one life would shine brighter than anyone ever imagined. Hey, stick with me till the very end. You won't believe what happened next, and I promise it's worth every second. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to our growth. Let's go. Life can change in ways nobody expects. Sometimes the same people who laughed at you yesterday will sit down in silence tomorrow, wondering how you managed to rise. This is not just a story about a reunion. It is a story about pride, mockery, and the kind of victory that makes even your enemies bow their heads. It all began on a quiet evening. Sophia, once the queen of her high school days, received an envelope with shiny letters on top. 10 years class reunion. The moment her eyes caught those words, her heart filled with excitement. She smiled proudly, thinking of how she would walk into that hall and remind everyone of the girl who ruled the school. In her mind, it was another chance to shine, to show she was still the most important of them all. Far away, in a modest office, another invitation was also delivered. Daniel, the boy everyone used to mock for his old shoes and torn shirts, held the same letter in his hand. But unlike Sophia, he did not rush to smile. He paused, thinking of the past, of laughter that cut deep, of voices that once told him he would never become anything. Little did anyone know, that simple paper in his hand would lead to a night nobody in that class would ever forget. They say pride has its own walk, and you can always tell when someone enters a room carrying more pride than joy. That evening, when the reunion finally began, every head turned toward the door. The sound of high heels echoed across the hall, commanding attention even before the face behind them appeared. It was Sophia, the same Sophia who, 10 years earlier, was the most popular girl in school. She had not lost her sense of drama. Dressed in a glittering gown, holding a golden purse, and walking like a queen returning to her throne, she made sure no one could ignore her. Her smile was wide, but her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for admiration, for whispers, for envy. Old classmates gasped and clapped politely. Some admired her dress, others whispered about her life. But Sophia didn't care about the truth of her reality. To her, appearances were everything. She waved at a few faces, hugged others with shallow warmth, and made small jokes about the years gone by. In her heart, she believed she was still untouchable, still the center of every story. As she settled into her seat, she whispered to a friend beside her, "I can't wait to see who managed to climb and who remained at the bottom." She laughed softly, already sharpening her tongue for the mockery she planned to deliver that night. But destiny was already preparing a surprise that would make her laughter freeze in her throat. Every reunion carries more than laughter. It also carries whispers. People talk in low voices, pretending to celebrate the present, but in truth, they are digging up the past. That night was no different. As old classmates gathered in groups, voices rose and fell like the beat of hidden drums. Some were smiling, sharing stories of success. New businesses, new homes, children studying abroad. Others spoke with sadness, explaining how life had not been too kind. But in every corner, one name kept sneaking into the whispers. Daniel. "Do you think he will come?" one asked quietly. "Daniel? That poor boy? Maybe he is too ashamed." Another replied with a laugh. "I heard he still struggles. Maybe he will hide himself." A third added, shaking his head. The words spread like wildfire. They remembered the boy who wore the same shoes for 3 years, the boy who once came late to school because he had to work in the market first. For many of them, Daniel was still the image of poverty. Sophia overheard the whispers, and her lips curved into a sly smile. "If he dares to show his face here," she said to her friend, "I will remind him of who he truly is." She felt powerful, thinking the past would protect her pride. But destiny had written a different kind of story, one where the whispers of the past would soon bow to the roar of the present. In every class, there is always that one person who fades into the background, the one whose name hardly makes it into conversations. For this reunion, that person was Daniel. While Sophia's name rolled off every tongue, decorated with stories of beauty and pride, Daniel's name was treated like dust swept under the carpet. When he finally stepped into the hall, there was no drumbeat, no cheer, no loud greetings. He entered quietly, dressed in a simple but neat suit. A few people glanced at him, their eyes narrowing as if struggling to remember. Some tilted their heads, whispering, "Who is that again?" Others shrugged, not even bothering to recall. Daniel walked slowly, his eyes scanning the familiar faces. He saw the same people who once laughed at his torn bag, the ones who mocked him when he could not pay for school trips, the ones who made him feel invisible. Yet now none of them seemed to recognize him. He smiled to himself, not with bitterness, but with calm strength. He did not need their recognition. He carried his own story, his own scars, his own victories that were still hidden like treasures under the ground. But the hall was about to learn that the boy nobody remembered had become the man nobody would ever forget. Mockery often comes when pride meets blindness. Sophia had been waiting for this very moment. When her eyes finally caught Daniel standing at the far end of the hall, her lips twisted into a mocking smile. To her, he still looked like the poor boy from years ago, even though his suit was clean and his posture calm. She leaned back in her chair and spoke loudly enough for others to hear. "Ah, look who decided to show his face. Daniel, the shoemaker's son. Tell me, did you fix your shoes before coming here?" Laughter broke out from the small circle around her. Heads turned, eyes began to follow the line of her words, and suddenly Daniel became the target. Some people chuckled nervously, while others whispered behind their hands. For a moment, the air grew thick with the same humiliation he once felt back in school. But Daniel did not flinch. He simply looked at Sophia with gentle eyes, gave a small smile, and walked past her without a word. That silence confused her more than any reply could have. She expected anger, shame, or defense. But Daniel carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove. Still, Sophia laughed again, raising her voice. "Silence means I am right," she shouted, and the crowd chuckled once more. But the night was only beginning, and soon that laughter would be swallowed whole. There are different kinds of laughter. Some bring joy, some heal wounds, but others cut deeper than knives. That night, the laughter that followed Sophia's mockery was not the laughter of friendship. It was the cruel echo of the past. The hall vibrated with it. Some classmates laughed loudly, eager to impress Sophia. Others joined in quietly, afraid to stand against the crowd. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, feeling the same sting he had felt many years ago. Back then, their laughter made him hide his tears. Back then, he carried shame home like a heavy bag. But tonight was different. Daniel's silence was not weakness. It was strength. He looked around the room, his eyes calm, his lips curved in a quiet smile. Deep inside, he remembered the long nights under a flickering lamp, the empty stomach that still pushed him to study, the hands that built his dream one brick at a time. Their laughter no longer owned him. Sophia leaned forward, enjoying the sound, believing she had won. But if she had looked closely, she would have seen that Daniel's silence was louder than her mockery. He was a man carrying a story too heavy for their jokes to bury. And very soon, the same mouths that laughed would open wide in shock. Silence has a language, and sometimes a single smile can speak louder than 1,000 words. After Sophia's mockery and the echo of cruel laughter, All eyes waited for Daniel to defend himself. Some expected him to shout back. Others thought he would storm out in shame. But what came instead was unexpected. Daniel smiled. It was not the smile of a broken man pretending to be strong. It was the calm, steady smile of someone who had walked through fire and come out shining. His lips curved gently, his eyes steady, his spirit unshaken. That single smile confused the crowd. Sophia frowned. She had hoped to see tears in his eyes, or at least anger burning on his face. Instead, he looked at her as though her words meant nothing at all. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, hiding her unease with a loud laugh. "Look at him smiling, as if he has something to be proud of," she said, trying to stir more laughter. But a few classmates noticed something different. That smile carried weight, like a secret nobody else knew. It was the smile of a man who held victory close to his chest, waiting for the right time to reveal it. Little did they know, the same smile they mocked was a silent warning. The tables were about to turn. Every smile hides a story, and every story carries secrets. Behind Daniel's calm face and gentle smile, there were years of battles fought in silence. Battles nobody in that reunion hall had seen. While they laughed at his poor clothes back in school, he had been busy building something greater than they could imagine. But Daniel was not the kind of man to boast. He carried his success like a hidden treasure, letting time reveal it instead of his own tongue. That night, as the music played and old classmates shared drinks, Daniel kept to himself, quietly watching. Some still ignored him, others whispered about how he had changed, but nobody truly knew the truth. The truth was hidden behind the curtain of his past. The nights he slept hungry but still studied. The days he worked in the market just to buy one textbook. The hours he spent alone, dreaming of a future far beyond the laughter of his classmates. Those struggles had shaped him into the man he was now. A man ready to shock the same people who once dismissed him. Sophia, however, had no idea. She leaned toward her friends and whispered, "He is still the same poor boy. Look at him. So quiet, so empty." Her words spread quickly, but little did she know that Daniel's silence was not emptiness. It was the silence of a storm waiting to break. And when that curtain finally lifted, the hall would never be the same again. In every gathering, there is always one name that travels faster than footsteps, whispered from ear to ear until it fills the whole room. That night at the reunion, the name was Daniel. At first, people said it quietly. "Is that really Daniel?" someone asked, squinting across the hall. "Yes, the boy who always borrowed notebooks," another replied. "No, it cannot be him," a third insisted. "He looks different, stronger somehow." The whispers grew louder. Every table had at least one person asking the same question. What happened to him? They were no longer laughing. Instead, curiosity was rising like smoke in a dry season. Daniel, the boy they once ignored, had become the center of their attention without even speaking a word. Sophia noticed the shift and her heart tightened. She wanted all eyes on her, yet the whispers were now carrying Daniel's name instead. Her smile faded for a moment, but pride forced it back onto her lips. She tossed her hair and said loudly, "Don't waste your time on him. Some people never change." But deep down, she could feel it. Something about Daniel was not the same. His quiet presence was louder than her voice, and his name, once buried under laughter, was now alive on everyone's lips. The stage was slowly being set, and soon the whole hall would know the truth. Every great event has a backbone, and for this reunion it was the mysterious sponsor. From the start of the evening, the committee had been praising the one who paid for the hall, the food, the music, and even the gifts on the tables. But nobody knew who it was. The suspense hung in the air like the smell of rain before a storm. When the time finally came, the master of ceremony tapped the microphone and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight's celebration was made possible by one of our very own classmates. a man who wanted to give back to the people he once sat in the same classroom with. Let us all rise and welcome our reunion sponsor. The hall buzzed. Heads turned. Eyes scanned the room. Whispers flew again. Some shouted Sophia's name, expecting her to stand. Others mentioned one or two classmates they knew had traveled abroad. But the moment the MC stretched out his hand toward Daniel, the hall froze. Gasps filled the air. Daniel? Voices echoed in shock. The same boy they had laughed at, the one they had forgotten, was the very person who carried the whole reunion on his shoulders. Sophia's smile cracked like glass. Her fingers gripped her purse tightly as her pride trembled. The first curtain had lifted, and the truth was beginning to shine. Truth is like the sun. No matter how long it hides, it must rise. When Daniel reached the stage, the hall was silent. Every pair of eyes followed him. Every whisper died down. He held the microphone gently, his calm smile still resting on his face. "My friends," he began softly, 10 years ago, many of you knew me as the poor boy who wore the same shoes every day. Yes, that was me. I was laughed at, mocked, and forgotten. But I carried those memories, not as wounds, but as fuel." The hall leaned closer. Some blinked in disbelief. Others shifted uncomfortably. Daniel continued, his voice steady. "Life taught me that poverty is not the end. It is only the beginning if you refuse to give up. Today, by God's grace, I stand here not as the boy you mocked, but as the founder of one of the largest companies in Africa, a company worth billions." Gasps swept across the hall. Mouths opened, hands covered faces, and Sophia's smile vanished completely. Her heart pounded as her pride melted like wax under the sun. The poor boy they once despised had risen higher than anyone ever imagined. If Daniel's words were thunder, what came next was lightning. The hall was still echoing with gasps from the billionaire revelation when the doors opened again. Heads turned, eyes widened, and silence swept across the room like a wave. She walked in gracefully, tall, radiant, and shining like a star. Cameras flashed instantly as whispers broke into astonished cries. It was her, the face they had only seen on magazine covers and billboards, the woman admired across nations. A world-famous supermodel. And she was walking straight toward Daniel. Her steps were slow but confident. The moment she reached the stage, she slipped her hand into his and smiled warmly at him. The crowd erupted in shock. "Is this real?" some asked. "That poor boy married to her?" The disbelief was thick in the air. Sophia's hands trembled as she gripped her chair. Her throat dried, her pride shattered. She had mocked Daniel for being poor. Yet here he stood, a billionaire with a wife more beautiful and powerful than anything she had ever dreamed. Daniel kissed his wife's hand gently, then turned back to the microphone. His eyes scanned the hall, calm and steady. The boy they had forgotten had returned, not only with wealth but with love and honor that silenced every mockery. The hall would never look at him the same again. Shock has a sound. It is the sudden intake of breath, the gasp that escapes before words can form. That was the sound that filled the reunion hall when Daniel stood tall with his supermodel wife beside him. Everywhere you turned, mouths were open, hands covered faces, and eyes refused to blink. People who had laughed at him minutes earlier now stared as if they were seeing a ghost. The whispers had died. What remained was silence broken only by gasps. One classmate muttered under his breath, "Is this the same Daniel we used to laugh at?" Another shook her head, whispering, "God is truly powerful." Some felt ashamed of their own laughter, their own pride, their own blindness. But Sophia, her gasp was different. It was sharp, painful, and heavy with regret. Her eyes darted around, searching for support, but no one laughed with her anymore. Pride could not cover the wound growing in her heart. She had mocked Daniel, yet now he was the one standing higher than them all. Daniel, calm and unshaken, looked around the hall. His silence carried more weight than any speech. It was the silence of a man who had endured mockery and risen above it. The gasps across the hall were not just surprise. They were the sound of tables turning. Life is like a wheel. No one stays at the top forever, and no one remains at the bottom. That night, the wheel turned in full view of everyone, and the tables shifted with power no man could stop. Moments ago, Sophia had been the queen of the room, her laughter the loudest, her pride the tallest. But as Daniel stood with his billionaire truth shining and his beautiful wife by his side, the crown fell from her head without anyone touching it. The eyes that once looked at her with admiration were now fixed on Daniel. Old classmates rushed forward to greet him, shaking his hand, praising his success, trying to remind him of small acts of kindness from the past. Even those who once mocked him now smiled sheepishly, eager to be noticed. Daniel accepted their greetings with calm humility, but his eyes never forgot. Sophia sat frozen. For the first time in her life, she felt invisible. No one was laughing at Daniel anymore. No one was praising her anymore. The hall had changed, and she was now just another face in the crowd. The boy she once mocked had risen, and her pride had fallen. The tables had truly turned. Humiliation has a voice, and it echoes long after the laughter has stopped. For Sophia, every sound in the hall that night carried the sting of her own shame. The same people who once joined her laughter were now whispering behind her back. "She mocked him first, didn't she?" One woman murmured. "Yes, she called him poor in front of everybody," another replied. "Now look at her face," a man added, shaking his head. Sophia heard the whispers. Each one pierced her heart like arrows. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled, but she forced a weak smile, pretending not to care. Pride told her to sit tall, but humiliation bent her shoulders low. Meanwhile, Daniel stood strong, his calm presence filling the hall. He had no need to remind anyone of the past. Their own guilt was reminding them for him. The echoes of humiliation that once haunted him in school had now returned, but they were no longer his to carry. They now belonged to those who had mocked him. Sophia lowered her eyes, afraid to meet Daniel's gaze. For the first time, she wished she could vanish from the room. But destiny does not hide shame. It exposes it, so that lessons can be learned. The echoes of humiliation were no longer Daniel's burden. They were Sophia's song of regret. Every success story has a beginning, and most times that beginning is full of pain. For Daniel, one of his deepest memories was his shoes with holes. They were not just shoes, they were symbols of every laughter, every insult. Every day he walked with shame but refused to stop moving. He remembered those mornings in school when rain soaked his feet because the soles were open like broken mouths. His classmates laughed and pointed. "Look at Daniel's shoes. Even the ground is tired of carrying him," they would shout. Each word cut his young heart, but he kept walking. There were days he tried to patch the holes with pieces of cardboard, pressing them inside to protect his feet. By break time, the cardboard would be soft with sweat and dirt, and the mockery would begin again. Even teachers pitied him but could do little. Yet, those same shoes carried him to the library after class. They carried him to the market where he worked to buy candles for studying. They carried him through shame, but also toward the future he was building quietly inside. What his classmates saw as weakness was the fire that shaped his strength. His shoes with holes became the path that led him to destiny. Greatness is not born in comfort. Sometimes it is born under the harsh glow of a lonely streetlight. Daniel remembered those nights like they happened yesterday. His small home had no electricity, and candles were too expensive to waste every night. So, when everyone else was asleep, he would take his old books and sit under the streetlight at the junction. Passers-by looked at him with pity. Some laughed. "See this poor boy. He thinks light from the street will turn him into a professor." Others shook their heads, wondering why a child would choose hardship over sleep. But Daniel knew what they didn't. Knowledge was his only key out of poverty. The mosquitoes bit him, the night breeze chilled him, and sometimes the police would chase him away. But he always returned. His notebooks were filled with lines written by trembling hands, his eyes red from sleepless nights. Yet, his heart burned brighter than the light above his head. While his classmates wasted time mocking his torn clothes, Daniel was feeding his mind under that streetlight. He didn't know it then, but those nights of struggle were building the billionaire who now stood tall before them. Streetlights became his classroom, and determination became his teacher. Some people carry riches in their pockets, but Daniel carried riches in his heart. Though his clothes were torn, his shoes broken, and his stomach often empty, he walked like somebody who had a secret. That secret was the fire burning inside him. Daniel's heart was full of fire. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that pushes a man forward when everything around him says, "Stop." He had every reason to give up. His classmates mocked him, hunger pressed him, and life seemed unfair. But inside he told himself, "This is not the end of my story. One day they will see." Every insult only made the fire stronger. Every night of hunger only added fuel. He used his pain as wood for the flame inside him. When others were sleeping, he was reading. When others laughed at him, he was planning. He had nothing in his hand, but everything in his spirit. That fire carried him through school, through rejection, through the lonely days when even hope seemed far. It was that same fire that later shaped the man who entered the reunion hall, not as the poor boy they once mocked, but as the billionaire they could not ignore. His fire became his future. Every great man is carried by a vision, and Daniel's vision was born in the middle of his pain. One evening, after a long day of mockery at school, he sat under a tree with nothing in his hand but his old, torn notebook. His stomach rumbled, and his eyes burned with tears, but something in his heart began to speak louder than the hunger. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "One day, I will build a life where no child has to cry because of poverty. One day, I will stand tall, not for revenge, but to show that suffering is not the end." That was the birth of his vision. It was bigger than escaping shame. It was bigger than proving Sophia or the others wrong. His vision was to create something so strong that even the poorest child could dream without fear. From that day, every insult became a reminder of his promise. Every sleepless night became an investment in his future. He was no longer just a boy with holes in his shoes. He was a boy carrying a dream larger than himself. The birth of that vision was the seed that later grew into the man the whole hall could not stop staring at. Dreams are seeds, but only hard work can turn them into harvest. After years of studying, after nights of sleeping on empty stomach, Daniel finally found his first small job. The pay was little, but his mind was sharp, and his heart was ready. Where others saw only survival, Daniel saw opportunity. He started saving every coin, not for food alone, but for the future he had promised himself. While his friends spent money on parties, Daniel spent on books, training, and small investments. His first business was nothing but a roadside kiosk selling phone accessories. Many laughed. From streetlight to street stall, what a waste. But Daniel smiled, because he knew every empire begins with a stone. Slowly, the stall grew. He expanded into 2 shops, then 3. His courage attracted partners, his honesty attracted investors. The boy who once studied under streetlights was now running businesses that lit up whole streets. Daniel faced failure many times, but each failure was a lesson. Each mistake became a stepping stone. Brick by brick, deal by deal, he built not just wealth, but an empire that could not be shaken. He was no longer Daniel the poor boy. He was Daniel the visionary, building a kingdom from ashes. Every journey has a moment when the struggle begins to smile back at you. For Daniel, that moment came the day he made his first million. It was not just money in his account. It was the proof that his suffering had not been in vain. He still remembered the day clearly. He had taken a bold risk, importing a batch of electronics with every little savings he had. People warned him, "Daniel, you will lose everything. Stay small. Don't dream too big." But Daniel's fire was too strong to let fear hold him down. He pressed forward. When the goods sold out within weeks, the profit shocked him. He held his bank statement and stared at the numbers, tears filling his eyes. 1 million. For the boy who once studied under a streetlight with an empty stomach, this was more than wealth, it was victory. He fell to his knees and whispered, "God, thank you. This is only the beginning." That first million was not for showing off. Daniel reinvested it. He opened more shops, hired more workers, and built trust with his customers. The poor boy had touched his first fruit of success, and from that seed, an empire was waiting to rise. Success can build a house, but love is what makes it a home. At the height of his struggles and growing victories, Daniel never thought love would find him. He was too busy chasing dreams, too busy carrying scars from the past. But love has its own timing. It comes quietly, when the heart least expects it. One rainy evening, Daniel had gone to a business seminar in the city. He was not looking for anything beyond knowledge. But there, among the crowd, he saw her, a woman with grace in her steps and kindness in her eyes. Unlike many who looked at him for his wealth, she spoke to him as though she saw his heart, not his pockets. Her name was Isabella, a young model who had faced her own share of struggles. Their conversations flowed like they had known each other for years. She did not laugh at his scars. She admired them. She did not see a billionaire in the making. She saw the boy who once studied under a streetlight. Daniel was surprised. Love had not come from the glamorous places he once dreamed of. It came from the simplest, most unexpected corner of his life. And in that moment he realized love, too, is a kind of wealth. Love is sweet, but true partnership is powerful. Daniel soon learned that Isabella was not just a woman to hold his hand. She was a woman who could stand by his side. While many chased after his money, Isabella cared about his dreams. She listened when he shared his plans, and she spoke wisdom that made him see farther than his own eyes could reach. One night, Daniel sat with papers scattered across his desk. A deal had gone wrong, and he was at the edge of losing millions. Fear crept into his heart. But Isabella touched his shoulder gently and said, "You have built everything with courage. Don't let fear stop you now. We will rebuild together if it fails." Those words gave Daniel strength. For the first time, he realized he was no longer alone in the fight. She prayed with him, worked with him, and encouraged him when doubts clouded his mind. Their bond became more than romance, it became fuel. With Isabella's support, Daniel made bold moves that expanded his empire. She was not just his wife-to-be. She was his partner in destiny. The power of true partnership is not in beauty or wealth. It is in two hearts walking as one, even through the storm. Greatness is not measured by money alone, but by the kindness a man gives to others. Daniel had not forgotten this truth. One evening, at a charity dinner organized by his company, he stood before a hall filled with rich men and women. But instead of boasting about his empire, Daniel chose to speak about kindness. He raised his glass and said, "I know what it feels like to be laughed at, to go to bed hungry, to walk with shoes that had more holes than leather. But I also know what it feels like when one person shows you mercy. A little kindness can save a life. Tonight, I don't just ask you to give money. I ask you to give hope." The room fell silent. Many expected him to brag about his billions, but instead he reminded them of humanity. That night, funds were raised to build schools, feed children, and give scholarships to those who were once like him. As the guests toasted, Daniel's heart was full. He was no longer the boy mocked at the reunion. He was a man whose wealth had become a river of kindness. His glass was not raised for pride, it was raised for compassion. Regret is a heavy load. It does not show on the back, but it shows in the eyes. As Sophia sat in the reunion hall, watching Daniel celebrated by everyone, Her proud smile melted away. Her eyes, once full of mockery, now carried a shadow of sorrow. She remembered the cruel words she had thrown at him years ago. "Look at your shoes, Daniel. Do you think success is for people like you?" She had laughed so loudly, leading others to laugh too. Now those same words echoed in her mind like poison. Every time Daniel's name was praised, her heart sank deeper. She thought of how she wasted her years chasing vanity. Expensive clothes, fake friends, empty pride. And there he was, the boy she called nothing, standing as a billionaire with a wife more graceful than any queen. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of joy. They were tears of regret. Regret for the laughter, regret for the insults, regret for the years she could not turn back. She wanted to stand and apologize, but shame held her down. The hall saw Daniel's victory, but Sophia's heart was carrying her defeat. A smile can hide many things, but when the heart is broken, even the brightest smile will shatter. Sophia had worn her beauty like a crown for years. At the reunion, she had entered the hall with her head high, flashing her perfect smile, hoping to remind everyone that she was still the queen of their school days. But as Daniel stood tall in victory, surrounded by respect and admiration, that smile began to crack. She forced her lips to curve, but the weight in her chest was too heavy. Her laughter no longer carried power, it carried weakness. Her smile, once her weapon, now betrayed her pain. People around her noticed. "Is that not Sophia? She doesn't look so proud anymore," someone whispered. Another said, "She mocked Daniel. Now see how life has mocked her." Their words burned hotter than fire. Sophia's hands trembled as she lifted her glass, pretending to toast with the others. But her reflection in the glass showed the truth. Eyes swollen with tears, lips shaking, her once dazzling smile broken into pieces. For the first time, Sophia realized that pride could not save her. Beauty could not cover her shame. Her smile was shattered, and her heart was laid bare. Victory is not complete when you crush your enemies. It is complete when you rise above them. Daniel understood this truth. As the night of the reunion drew to a close, all eyes were still on him. Many expected him to humiliate Sophia the way she once humiliated him. Some even whispered, "Let him pay her back. Let her feel the pain." But Daniel's heart was different. He did not come to wound. He came to show what destiny can do. When he finally walked toward Sophia, the hall grew silent. Her body stiffened, her eyes lowered, and her broken smile faded completely. She thought he would mock her, remind her of her insults, or laugh in her face. Instead, Daniel gave a gentle smile and said softly, "Goodbye, Sophia. I wish you well." His words were calm, polite, and full of finality. No anger, no bitterness, just the dignity of a man who had outgrown the pain of the past. Sophia froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The kindness in his voice was more painful than revenge. It reminded her of the greatness she once failed to see in him. And with that, Daniel turned, leaving her with nothing but silence and the taste of regret. Sometimes victory is not in words, it is in the way you walk away. When Daniel decided to leave the reunion, the hall still buzzed with whispers and gasps. Every eye followed him as he took Isabella's hand, his supermodel wife, and began walking toward the exit. There was no pride in his steps, no arrogance in his smile, only quiet strength. The same boy who once left classrooms with his head bowed in shame was now leaving a grand hall with his head lifted high. This time it was not laughter following him. It was admiration. Some classmates stood to clap. Others bowed their heads, unable to face the weight of their own regrets. Sophia sat frozen in her chair, her shattered smile completely gone, her heart bleeding with the truth she could not escape. Daniel did not look back. He had no need to. The reunion had given him something far greater than revenge. It had shown everyone the power of patience, of resilience, of destiny. As the doors closed behind him, people whispered, "This night will not be forgotten. Daniel has written his name in our hearts." And just like that, he exited not in shame but in triumph. Life has a way of turning the weakest boy into the strongest man when he refuses to give up. That night, as Daniel's car pulled away from the reunion, memories filled his heart. He remembered the boy with shoes full of holes, the boy who studied under streetlights, the boy who was mocked until his tears became his pillow. That boy was gone, but he had not died. He had simply grown into the man now driving into destiny. Isabella held his hand and smiled. "You have won, Daniel," she whispered, but Daniel shook his head gently. "No, my love, we have not just won for ourselves. We have won for every child who believes their pain is the end. My story must tell them. Pain can be a beginning." As the city lights reflected in his eyes, Daniel knew his journey was far from over. He had built wealth, found love, and gained respect. But more importantly, he had turned scars into lessons and humiliation into a crown. He was no longer the forgotten boy in the corner of the classroom. He was the man whose life had become a message. No matter where you start, destiny can still drive you to greatness. The boy mocked yesterday had finally driven into tomorrow, into destiny. Thank you for watching through. Hey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And while you're at it, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update.